Hello, everybody. Congrats on coming to the end of the class, and happy 4th of July this week. In that note, I did my paper on Thomas Paine, and figure it's apropos being July 4th coming up here. But the question I had was whether or not he was an agitator, just a rabble rouser, or an actual honest revolutionary. A little bit about Paine. He was, of course, grew up in England. He had a Quaker father and an Anglican mother, which is a little bit odd and probably meant that there wasn't a whole lot of religion of any kind in the house, although he did have a little bit of a religious education. Anyways, he was a tax collector, been fired twice, but was chosen to represent the Union to the Excise Board, which he did. He ended up meeting Ben Franklin, and they ended up with a close friendship for the rest of their lives, and Franklin was kind of his mentor, almost a father figure. But anyways, after being fired, he was kind of destitute and lost, and Franklin suggested he go to America and sent him a letter of recommendation, which worked. So he arrives in America December 1774, penned Common Sense in January 1776 at the behest of Benjamin Rush. Common Sense, of course, was widely distributed, had massive success, 500,000 copies worldwide in the course of 2 years. It's often referred to as sermon-like in its content, which was, of course, popular in the day, and he probably stole a lot from sermons at the time. Of course, he did reference heavily 1 Samuel 8 in there, and God not wanting to make a king for the Israelites. And we all, of course, know how that went. He then ended up going back to England in 87 after the revolution was long over, and then slowly began to take part in the French Revolution. Jefferson and Adams were both in France at the time, and so he used that to his advantage. He ended up writing Rights of Man, which, of course, was huge for the French Revolution. Quite influential there. He ended up being imprisoned by Robespierre in 1794 because he had advocated against killing the king and queen. He spent 10 months in the prison where he wrote Age of Reason and Thence His Fall from Grace. He was a contentious individual, argued with people a lot, was always seeming to pick fights in letters. But throughout his life, his Republicanism, adherence to it was very consistent. And also his anti-monarchy or anti-aristocracy was also very consistent throughout. Both ideas I'm sure that he learned in his time in England. Paine, of course, wrote many letters that we have access to, which helps to decide what kind of an individual he was, what his motivations were. Common Sense, The American Crisis, Rights of Man, Age of Reason. Especially in Common Sense, but also in The American Crisis, he referenced the Bible a lot. He referenced God Almighty a lot, divine providence. It was kind of central to his argument. However, we see from John Adams' autobiography, Adams contested that shortly after he wrote that, he admitted to Adams that he was thought the Bible was a joke and was just using it to his advantage. Which, of course, Adams didn't like. It would not have been popular at the time. But we move on to the Age of Reason that he wrote in prison, where the tone completely changed. And not only did he show doubt in any religion, but he very much mocked it throughout, which basically ruined his reputation in America. He ended up being buried in America in a grave on a farm because no gravesite or cemetery would allow him to be buried there, where he was eventually exhumed and returned to England. So likely he probably faked the religion that he espoused in Common Sense and Rights of Man. He was largely friendless, hated by many of his American peers as time went on, especially after the Age of Reason. But my conclusion on this was his actions and intentions in the American Revolution and the French Revolution as well were both sincere. He wasn't just an agitator.